We always look forward to Thursdays in particular because the chat with Pat happens, and of course it happens each day, but only one day do we get to chat with one of our favorite guests.
Yes, and today she's back. It's Thursday, so it's got to be Joan Watson. This is one of my favorite days of the week because I get to talk to her. And Joan is a writer and a speaker in the Catholic world, and we're talking about her book, Making a Pilgrimage, A Companion for Catholics. And notice that subtitle, A Companion for Catholics. You don't have to be going somewhere on a pilgrimage to appreciate this book. It's a wonderful book. Joni, how you doing today?
I am doing really well. Happy Thursday.
Yeah, I know, and it always is a happy Thursday with you. So I want to jump into, we kind of left off on, we've been talking about the Camino, the big pilgrimage to the burial place of St. James. That's kind of a big hotspot pilgrimage. And we left off last week at the kind of the subtitle of The Builders. Now, I found this interesting because you're bringing in people and what they did and what made them important and what they did in this time frame in ways that, like, I never even considered. So you talk about the way from France into Santiago is still probably one of the most popular routes that people do to get there. But then you mentioned this town, which in English is Dominic of the Causeway. It's along this popular route, and it gets its name, obviously, from someone called Dominic. So can you tell us that story? It's a great story.
Yeah, so, I think sometimes we have these heavy hitter saints that we know well, and we are telling their stories all the time, and we forget sometimes that there are these amazing saints who were heavy hitters at their time, and maybe we've forgotten them because they're not in our country or they're not directly connected with our experience.
Right.
And I think one of those is the Saint Dominic, not the Saint Dominic who founded the Dominican order, but Saint Dominic of the about 11th century. He was Santo Domingo, Spanish, just like Saint Dominic founded the Dominicans, but later. So Santo Domingo worked along the Camino. And so as pilgrims are walking the Camino, the way towards Santiago, as we mentioned last week, that's lots of different paths. There's lots of different ways to get to Santiago. One of the more popular ones then and now is the one that kind of goes across northern France or northern Spain from France. And he was, he helped build. I put him under this title of the Builders because Dominic helped pilgrims, and he built a really important bridge across the river, and he, worked building, repairing, maintaining the road. He constructed a hospital, he built more bridges, so he worked to help pilgrims make their journey. And I think sometimes we forget about the people that are involved in pilgrimage that make pilgrimage possible because they're either maintaining the shrines or they're planning the trips or they're just, making the roads that make pilgrimage possible. And so one of those guys was this Saint Dominic and his friend Bishop Gregory, who was instrumental in him working on the Camino.
Okay, you got to tell me, though, you got to tell the audience about the chicken story.
Yes. So there are all these great miracles, right? And one of, if you go today and pray at his tomb at the Cathedral of Santo Domingo, you may be surprised to find chickens. You might find a rooster and a chicken in the cathedral there. And it's because there's this really beautiful story where there were people, Germans on pilgrimage, and this was long after the time of Dominic. And so they were on pilgrimage, and the daughter was basically the innkeeper made advances towards, the daughter of the innkeeper made advances towards the son of this German group that was on pilgrimage.
Okay.
And so the son, rejected the innkeeper's daughter, and she tried to frame him for robbery. And he was condemned to death because of this robbery that she, planted something in his bag.
Sure.
And he was hung. And, the parents were told that, no, Dominic de la Casalda, Dominic of the Causeway, has spared your son. So even though he was hanged, they said, no, he spared them. So they go to the local magistrate and they say, our son has been hanged, but he's actually still alive because he's innocent. And the local magistrate was sitting down to his dinner, and he's like, yeah, if your son's alive, he's as alive as this chicken on my plate. And at that, the chicken leapt up and crowed. So this great story of innocence protected. Now their descendants, supposedly the descendants of this chicken and this rooster, are kept in the cathedral. So,
I love that story.
I just had to include that funny
You
story.
did, Joni. And this is, I'm so glad you put it in there because I just think that is a hoot, that, and so their son was really alive?
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's the story. So
as legend goes, as they
supposedly
say.
they went back and they found that their son was still alive. So
Wow.
there's a couple different versions of this story,
Right.
But there, it's made its way into song and made its way into kind of Camino lore. There are lots of things along the Camino that are passed along and
Sure.
and should inspire our faith, right? They should inspire that God looks after the innocent and things like that. So,
right.
Yeah.
So,
but there are chickens.
There are
in the
chickens
cathedral.
in the cathedral. That explains it. So people go there and wonder. You got it. If you read Joni's book, you'll understand all of it. So,
right.
Joni, let's kind of finish our discussion today with Saint. Is it Bona of Pisa?
Saint Bona of Pisa, like the Leaning Tower of
Pisa. Okay. Tell us, because she's the patron of tour guides, and she comes into play on this Camino, or also, right? What's her story?
Yeah, so she's another one of those saints that I discovered while writing the book. I didn't know beforehand, like Saint Domingo, and was just really inspired by her story. She's the patroness of tour guides because she herself was a tour guide. She was a young girl. She had kind of some mystical experiences, and supposedly St. James appeared to her. It's kind of a funny story. Jesus and Mary and several saints appeared to her. She was a small child, so she kind of ran away from them. And St. James the Greater supposedly went and got her and brought her back to Jesus, which is a fierce, I think, very realistic story, right? This little girl's like, what's happening?
Yeah.
So St. James brings her back to Jesus, and she has a great devotion after that to St. James. And so she wants to walk the Camino. She wants to do what other pilgrims are doing in the medieval ages. In the meantime, her father actually was fighting in the Crusades. She had the guts to go after him and to go to the Holy Land. She actually was kidnapped by Muslim pirates, had to be ransomed. But through all this, that didn't deter her from pilgrimage. She remained dedicated to the idea of pilgrimage. And she ended up taking 9 different groups on the Camino to Santiago, to the tomb of St. James. So throughout her life, she really spends it leading others on pilgrimage. I think that's why I was so inspired by her story, that all of us are called in some way to lead others to Christ, and she chose to do that through pilgrimage. She went on pilgrimage to other places, the shrine of St. Michael, which Padre Pio kind of made famous again. It's near the home of Padre Pio. So the shrine of St. Michael, Rome, all sorts of places. She was actually on her 10th Camino to Santiago when she fell sick, and she went back to Pisa and died. She's buried in Pisa, although last year I tried to make a pilgrimage to her grave, and the church was locked. And I remained, I prayed outside the church and knew she was in, her tomb was in there.
Yeah.
But, so she's in the same place as that Leaning Tower that St. Sophia.
Oh, that's Joni. That's amazing. I mean, and thank you so much for introducing us to these new saints. Like you said, there are so many, and so it's nice to see the ones that certainly are attached to what we're talking about here, pilgrimage. So have a great weekend ahead, okay, Joni?
Thanks so much, Pat. God bless.